Well, welcome to another episode of Chris McDaniel's America here on the Midnight Ride Network. With me, as always, Jack Fairchild. Jack, how are you today?
I'm doing pretty good, Chris.
Well, I always joke that we're one show away from being canceled.
Yes.
And so far, we've made it through several. That just means nobody's listening.
Yep.
The instant they hear this show, though, it's going to change everything, because this may be difficult to understand, but we're going to touch on some really interesting subjects today. Subjects that are going to be, to put it lightly, objectionable to a lot of people. And it starts with a premise. And I want you to think through this, because it seems we're caught up in this space now in this country where truth really doesn't matter. And it reminds me, there was a philosopher, a French writer, probably more writer than a philosopher, years ago. He said, there is no truth, only perception. Only perception. I got to thinking about that in the lens of what we're watching unfold and what we're seeing now in a lot of different issues, whether it's the Ukrainian aid package and what's happening there and the split in the GOP caucus, whether it's the media and how they've handled the WNBA and how they seem to imply sexism around every turn there, when in fact, there's a lot of other reasons as to why these WNBA players are making less than NBA players. Naturally, also, I started thinking about AI and how it's learning, and AI does have the potential to learn. I know that's mind-blowing to a lot of people out there, but it made me do some testing a few days ago to get to the bottom of whether or not there's real bias or prejudice in AI.
So you were messing around with Skynet.
Well, I'm going to get to that in a second. No one in our audience knows what Skynet is, Jack, but I appreciate the reference to Terminator. And but when AI hears that one day, they're gonna have an issue with you. I started thinking about AI and what it means, and I tested it. And I promise you, what you're going to find is there is no truth, only perception. And that was concerning to me. I don't know where it ends, but I think it ends with this. And the last story we'll cover, strangely enough, is that, believe it or not, for the first time in more than 100 years, IQs are dropping.
Shocking.
Well, we knew it was happening. It was just a matter of time. We'll try to get to the root cause as to why IQs are dropping, other than senility in Joe Biden. His test alone has probably bottomed out the greater percentage of most Americans. Let's start, first of all, with Ukraine, the aid there, and how Congress is behaving, not only in passing the Ukrainian aid package in the House, but how they're behaving toward each other. Once again, we're watching Democrats cut deals with Republicans to advance a more liberal agenda.
Yes.
And once again, the conservatives in the chamber have been left out. It happens all the time. Now, they're complaining and they're chirping and they're getting some attention, but let's not kid ourselves. This is the same old game Washington always plays. Every time there's a compromise, it always benefits the left. And Mike Johnson, I don't doubt that he's a good man. Sincerely, I believe he's a Christian. He's right next door there in Louisiana. A lot of very good things about Mike Johnson, but he's following the same pattern as all the other speakers, and that pattern is this. Let's try not to offend the moderates in the party, but let's offend the conservatives in the party. And it's the same thing we've seen with the last 5, 6, 7 speakers that happen to represent our side of the equation. They're okay ticking us off. They just don't want to get the moderates mad. They've got to pick a side, because here we are again, losing because the moderates are celebrating. That's how we know we're losing. They spent all day celebrating this Ukrainian aid package. And it goes back to an earlier point about perception and reality. The American people have been very, very clear, I think, at least in the Republican Party, with the type of government they desire. But that's not what we're getting. And yet every year we reelect the same people over and over and over again. Remember, what did he say? There is no truth, only perception. The truth is the Republican Party has shifted far to the left. The truth is the same people we trust with our values, the same people we trust with our Constitution, the same people we trust to uphold our platform have betrayed us time and time and time again. But perception dominates truth, and perception is controlled by money. If you've ever wondered why it is that Mike Johnson and every other speaker can cut deals with Democrats, because they know ultimately all they have to do is to raise a certain amount of money to preserve those handful of Republicans that like to cross over with him. Mm-hmm. So it's really a money game, because money buys perception. It's not the truth. It's perception. And it leads me to a very shocking conclusion. I don't think the American people as a whole, most voters, I'm not sure they're really after the truth. The truth is uncomfortable. The truth hurts feelings. Here's the truth. The debt is going to crush this country. That's a truth. Nobody wants to talk about it. Here's the truth. The federal government's grown more than ever even conceived by anybody, much less the founding fathers, and nobody's doing a darn thing to stop it. That's the truth. Here's the truth. The country is in a death spiral socially and culturally. That's the truth. And the same politicians that placed us in this predicament are the same ones we keep reelecting. That's the truth. Because they can frame perception. You know what Americans really want? The voters, what they really want? They want bedtime stories. They want to be patted and told everything is okay.
Yep, that is 100% accurate.
They want everything's going to be fine. Trust us. We know what we're doing. But the body of work we've seen over the last 40 years shows that Washington, D.C. doesn't have a clue as to what they're doing. And yet every year they're able to raise the funds, make the backroom deals, stab you in the back. They laugh at you behind your backs. They laugh at you in those backroom deals. I've been there. I've seen it. They think you'll forget the sins against the platform. They think you'll forget the sins against the party, against the Constitution. They think you'll forget. No, they know you'll forget because you've done it time and time and time again. And then we get obsessed with all the wrong things. We can't seem to focus on the truth because it's uncomfortable. You know, liberty is uncomfortable. Have you ever considered that? When you talk about self-reliance and self-preservation, and you talk about picking up yourself by your bootstraps and getting out there and working hard, that frightens people.
It does.
It frightens people. But that's America, isn't it?
It's supposed to be.
All right, wrapped somewhere in this cocoon of safety we're attempting to build is fiction, a perception. How bad is it? Let me give you some numbers and blow your mind, because there's been a handful of objectors when it comes to this Ukrainian deal package. And I want to be clear, whether it's Ukraine or wherever, I'm not a big fan of sending taxpayer dollars overseas. I'm less of a fan, as you know, with sending military might.
Yeah.
And our men and women troops overseas. I'm less of a fan there. But let's just freeze frame this for a moment and talk about truth as opposed to perception and ask ourselves, it was only about $80 to $90 billion, right? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Fair assessment? A lot of money, right?
Yeah.
Breathtaking amount of money, and all of a sudden, fiscal hogs are everywhere, right?
Yes.
These fiscal hogs. Where have these fiscal hogs been all these years, where we're literally adding trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars to the debt every year? But now this 80 to 90, it's the end of the world. Let's talk about it. Because really, it's budget dust, isn't it?
Now, when you look at the numbers, yes.
I would have voted no. I would have been against it, but there's a whole bunch of programs I would have voted no on. A whole bunch of spending I would have voted no on.
Yeah.
I'm looking for an element of consistency. Let's put the numbers together and recognize what's happening here. Do you know how much 1,000 billion is?
That's a number that's hard for me to comprehend.
$1 trillion.
Yeah.
1,000 billion.
Yeah, it's just hard to comprehend.
It's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. We spend 1.5 trillion each year on Medicare and Medicaid.
Wow.
Now let's put it in perspective. That's 1,500 billion. We just sent 80 to Ukraine, and the fiscal hosts are going crazy. Let's keep going here. Entitlements. These numbers are absolutely mind-blowing. And just since 2013, we've doubled our expenditures on entitlements. That's a per capita reading. Per capita. Per American man, boy, and child, we've doubled our spending since 2013 on entitlements. And some of these proposals are absolutely mind-boggling. Biden's budget, $2.6 trillion in new entitlement programs. Okay, that's child tax credit expansions. Okay, that's government child care. It's bailouts, it's paid family leave, blah, 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 all designed to wrap us in the comfort of this wonderful, loving hand of government. And more specifically, to buy votes for these people that have already messed this thing up beyond recognition. Now, nobody complains about any of that stuff, but $80 billion, we're going to burn the place to the ground. Here's the idea. It all has to be rectified.
That's accurate.
It all has to be rectified. Yes. It's strange to me that we'll pick a small, minute number like this, which, believe me, I would vote against. It's ridiculous. But then ignore the bigger problems. And much of this debt, this is where it's going to hurt. Much of this debt took place under Republican leadership.
Absolutely, it did. And Chris, I think you know the reason why people can be more offended by aid to the Ukraine as opposed to entitlements, because the aid to the Ukraine, they don't see any benefit in that. Whereas the entitlements, they don't want to talk about that because there might be a benefit to them.
They may want that child tax credit expansion. They may want that free health care or for that matter, free child care. Yep. How absurd.
It is.
Do you really believe the federal government should be in the position of doing any of these things? It's already shown you it can barely deliver the mail, but you think it can handle health care. It can't. It never will be able to. You're going to get the same results every time. Overinflated budgets, out of control spending, and a bureaucratic state that just sucks us dry as much as it can. And then we complain about it. But it's funny the fights we pick when the entire thing is on fire right now. Now, perception versus reality. There is no truth, he said, only perception. The hearings in Washington. Have you seen these knuckleheads hold these hearings in Washington, D.C.?
Oh, I've watched a few, yes.
It doesn't matter who's in control. They're not getting anything done, but they hold hearings for these gotcha moments, right?
Yeah.
Gotcha. If Fox is there, the Republicans want to get a gotcha moment. If CNN is there, the Democrats want to get a gotcha moment. But really nothing is being done. In fact, every one of those individuals is playing follow the leader because they play follow the leader because that leader can get them reelected.
Yep.
And so naturally, they don't mind making deals with Democrats because it doesn't hurt them. There's no accountability. And the state party, especially here, has been dead silent. Think about the last just couple of months. Republicans all over the state, 2/3 supermajority, well, in every chamber, right? Mm-hmm. And we've passed pretty much Medicaid expansion. It's not quite there yet, but each chamber passed its own version. Mm-hmm. And we've passed early voting. Those are Democratic checklists. Those are Democrat wish lists. And we pass it because they know y'all ain't paying attention. Yep. Because they know you'll turn a blind eye. Because they know they can raise enough money to control perception as opposed to truth. Because the truth is they don't belong in office, but as long as they control the perception, we keep losing. It's the same thing going on in D.C. Now, to show you how it all worked out, there was this big fight, and thank goodness for that small number of conservatives that tried to do the right thing with the Ukrainian package. And then the other Republicans began to attack them today. Did you see that attack, Pete?
I did.
These are fellow Republicans just calling out conservatives. Consider that for a second. I've never heard them say these things about the Democrats.
What happened to the...
Wait, hold on. Did you read what this guy said? You sent me the story, you must have.
Which one are we...
We'll get to that in a second. The point is massive criticism from Republicans to conservatives, but never criticism of the Democrats. That sounds really familiar. I've seen Delbert Hosemann here in Mississippi do that, right?
Yeah.
And yet they get away with it because perception is more important than truth. And you say, well, Chris, you're complaining a lot. What do we do about it? I don't know. Put down TikTok for 10 minutes.
Yeah, pay attention.
Pay attention. Get your neighbors on board. Because the way it's working right now is we're falling for the same things over and over and over again. And you'll believe those negative ads and you'll put those people right back in time and time and time again. So you can tell I'm probably frustrated, because it's always the same story. The small number of conservatives that attempt to hold the line are ostracized, they're beaten, they're made fun of, they're mocked, ultimately thrown out of office because the people want bedtime stories. They don't want the truth. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing happened to Winston Churchill. Yep. Same thing happened to Margaret Thatcher. Yep. It seems that conviction doesn't belong in politics, and that bothers me greatly because we're supposed to be people of conviction, politics of conviction. But what do they tell us? Go along to get along.
Oh, yeah.
It's art of the possible. Learn to reach across the aisle. I'm still waiting for the Democrats to reach across the aisle.
Why should they? They know they're going to get everything that they want just by waiting out the Republicans because they're going to cave.
Leading to my final point about Mike Johnson. The Democrats love him.
Yeah, they do.
Now, I'm sure he's a great guy. Again, I know he's a good Christian man. Why would they even try to vote him out?
Yeah.
They've gotten everything they've requested.
Yep.
I mean, my goodness, we hold the chamber, they hold the policy. That sounds familiar as well. We're seeing it in many states out there. But again, we will find one day, Lord willing, a Speaker of the House that will actually learn to offend moderates as opposed to offend conservatives. And then maybe we'll get somewhere. But we got to get over this whole issue of perception. Now, leading to that next point, the WNBA. The WNBA. This is going to get us in trouble. Are you prepared?
I am definitely prepared.
A few years ago, I made a post on Facebook about the Me and Woman March. You remember that?
I do. I do remember a lot of comments coming back on social media.
I got boxes and boxes of mail. Boxes and boxes of mail. I think I pretty much offended every liberal woman across the country. I was cussed out in every language.
Yeah, and I still don't understand why.
Well,
I really don't. You didn't say anything that offensive or anything offensive at all if they read it.
Well, I thought it was truthful.
It was true.
I thought it was truthful. I mean, I'm going to paraphrase it now. I'll probably butcher it and make it much worse. But I basically said if they can afford the plane tickets and the bus rides and all the stuff it took to go to all these marches, why can't they pay for their own birth control?
I think that's a fair question.
Trying to be offensive. I was asking a fair question. It's a matter of money, isn't it? Why do they want me to pay for it when you can pay for all this other stuff?
Well, they got offended because instead of answering the question, it was better to just say that it goes back to similar things we talked about. You must be a sexist because why would you dare ask the question? Because they know they can't answer the question.
That's the phrase, sexist. And that's where we're heading right now. We're on the sexist train. I can hear it leaving the station right now. And I don't have a sexist bone in my body. You don't either.
Yeah.
But this is the way the American left does it. Remember, it's not so much perception or truth. It's all perception.
Yeah.
Here's the perception. The left likes to create a chart. And they put man's salary here.
Yeah, I've seen it.
And they put female salary here.
Seen that too. Yeah.
And they say, look at the chart. There's a disparity. It must be sexism. That's the argument. That's the argument. And they do that for every issue. Here's a chart. Here's some data. Here's a data point. It doesn't fit the way they think it should fit. So it can't be any number of 1,000 factors. It has to be one of the isms, right? Sexism. So the WNBA, as you know, has some pretty high-profile signings last week.
Yeah.
Caitlin Clark's among those.
Mm-hmm.
And not to take anything away from that woman's talent, she is one of the most talented basketball players for a female I've ever seen.
Yeah,
There's nothing she can't do. She's got the handle. She's got the outside shot. She's absolutely just a lot of fun to watch.
Mm-hmm.
And then Angel Reese out of LSU. I mean, she's good as well. I don't like her personality or attitude sometimes. I guess I can say that about Caitlin Clark, I suppose, from time to time. But they're just really talented people. And it might help the WNBA. But remember, the WNBA isn't a place that can print money, unlike our federal government. The WNBA has to rely on profits to pay these players. And so remember, you put an NBA player here and he makes X. You put a female WNBA player and she makes Y.
Yeah.
And it's pretty big difference there. Sexism, right? No. There's 1,000 other reasons. The first of which is nobody watches the WNBA.
That's fair.
That's going to get me in trouble. Well,
but it's factual.
When I say nobody, I'm just giving you some perspective. About 300,000 roughly people per episode, and that basically falls. That's probably less than the people listening to us this week. That's low.
Yeah.
So let's think about some of this data. I started looking at it, trying to examine it as best I could because I wanted a fair, truthful show. And it starts with anecdotal evidence because Chicago Sky last year won the WNBA championship, and they had a parade. Mm-hmm. Did you see the parade?
Yeah, there was nobody there.
Yeah, we have a comparison there. The Bulls had a parade when they won, and the entire city turned out. The Cubs had a parade. I know that upsets Jim because he's a St. Louis Cardinals fan, but the Cubs had a parade, and the entire city turns out.
They set records for a gathering.
Absolutely. The Blackhawks have a parade. Turns out the Chicago Sky have a parade, and there's like 13 people.
Yeah.
There were more people on the buses than there were watching the parade. Now, I'm not passing judgment on whether that's good or bad. I wish more people got involved in sports. I love it. It just goes to show you that for whatever reason, they're not generating the interest that other sports have generated. Look at these numbers here. The NFL gets about 17 million viewers per telecast. Did you know that?
I did.
NASCAR, 2.2 million.
Mm-hmm.
Many of those in the South, of course. Major League Baseball, 1.4 million. NBA, 1.6 million.
Mm-hmm.
Only 321,000 folks watch the WNBA per telecast.
Yep.
That's it. So money's the issue. You can't just pay these ladies these massive salaries when they're not bringing in the money. The league itself, I'm not sure if you know this, but it's lost about $10 million each year it's been in existence. $10 million. Mm-hmm. The NBA subsidizes it to the tune of $12 million each year just to keep it afloat. And if I'm not mistaken, of the 8 original teams in the WNBA, 4 have already gone defunct.
Including the original champion.
So you have a situation here where there's a fundamental problem with money being made in the WNBA. Now, that doesn't mean it's sexism.
Yeah.
It just means the talent level isn't drawing attention the way you might think it should. Now, this is also going to get me in trouble because I played a lot of basketball.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's hard to tell now, but I played a lot of basketball. It was my favorite sport, and I happen to think that I was pretty good at a time. Not now, not so much now. But Mississippi, I'll take my state for example, has some really good basketball teams in the Jackson area.
Mm-hmm.
Really good basketball teams at Gulfport at one time, outstanding teams.
Yeah.
Any one, this is going to get me in trouble, but you just mark my words, any one of those state championship teams, any one, high school boys, ages 16 to 18, would dominate the WNBA.
That's not wrong.
It wouldn't even be close.
And I can help back that up for you.
Go ahead.
The U.S. women's national soccer team, at the time when they were ranked number 1 in the world, the best women's soccer team in the world, played a game against an under 14 boys team and got beat 12-0. That happened.
It happens.
I mean, and that's so that backs up your statement.
Okay. Well, the show today is truth versus perception. The perception they want us to see is that everything is equal. They play the same game.
Yeah.
After all, it's the same game.
Yeah.
Well, it's not the same game. It's a very different game. You remember Brittany Griner? Was that her name? The big, tall woman that was arrested?
Yeah.
There was an anecdotal evidence of her trying to dunk one day before a ball game, and she missed a couple of dunks. Pretty ugly.
Yeah.
Ugly dunks. There are high school ninth graders that are dunking basketball, for goodness sakes.
Yeah.
Let's not kid ourselves here. So the perception may be one thing, which is what the liberals want us to see, but the truth is something very, very different. It's dominated in large part because it's more exciting. Here's some more numbers, and I thought this was fascinating. I bet you didn't know these numbers. Basically, the NBA generates, with 30 teams, about $10 billion in revenue annually. WNBA, $80 million. Let that sink in. 10 billion versus 80 million.
Yeah. It's gone up from the number I looked up when I was covering this. So WNBA's at a marginal improvement, I think, but it's crazy, because they don't generate. They play less than half. They play less than half the number of games. Yet they scream equal pay, and I don't get it. And they're not drawing.
If it may be the same game, but the level of competition is vastly different. And I don't believe it's sexism to say that. I think it's a biological, scientific, and provable fact.
Yeah.
Now, they're going to hear this show and think we've lost our minds. But the data is the data.
Yeah.
And it's very clear across the board. For whatever reason, the WNBA is not selling tickets. Because it's not selling tickets, it can't afford the larger salaries that the NBA can afford. So we'll have to work through that.
Yeah.
The emails start coming.
Well, how about instead of screaming sexist and misogyny, how about you go buy a ticket to a game? How about you go buy one of these jerseys? If you're that offended at the salaries that these WNBA players are making, make a difference by showing up. Make a difference by buying their jersey. If you're not willing to do that and you're just going to get online and type on your keyboard about how, look at this pay gap, then you're part of the problem and you don't even realize it.
Well, it's you got to be able to think critically to understand positions. And the American left takes advantage of our really fast attention span, or our lack of our attention span. And so when it shows us this data, I can see a lot of the young viewers are like, it's just wrong to pay them so little. It's called the free market.
Yeah.
And to the extent that there are other superstars in the NBA that are complaining about this, I think your suggestion is perfect.
Yeah.
I don't see anything wrong with Charles Barkley or anybody else taking a big chunk of their change and giving it to the league.
Yeah.
I'm sure they would appreciate that very much. Yeah. Maybe even sponsorships or something.
Absolutely. I mean, if you want to change it, if you're that offended by it, turn on the game when it's on TV.
But don't blame sexist.
No, because that's not it. The reality, again, is the fact that they're not drawing. And you put it out with the numbers. If you go and you look up the attendance, compare the average NBA attendance to the WNBA, and it's not close.
Sectional. All right, with that said, before I transition into the one other topic, which is this, we're not done with this gender pay discrepancy because they've taken the WNBA as an example. We've been hearing this argument for years with all sorts of positions out there.
Yeah.
I want to get to the bottom of that. I want to see what the truth is as opposed to the perception.
Yeah.
Before we get to that, how's that my pillow treating you?
Look, it's one of the most comfortable sleeps that I've had. It's one of these. I am so grateful that they gave us the pillow to sample because, as you know, Chris, because talk to you, I sometimes have trouble sleeping or wake up with that crick in your neck. I haven't had a single crick in my neck since I got that MyPillow. And just want to remind everybody too that if you go to mypillow.com, enter the promo code Midnight Ride, you can save up to 80% off on select products. That's pillows, comforters, slippers, that coffee that Mike still hadn't sent us a sample yet. So, and remember the feels they can form, Chris.
Yeah, there's going to be a lot of Northerners wonder what a crick in the neck is.
That's fair.
But I think maybe that's his new slogan. No more cricks.
No more cricks. I like it.
Next. And look, it's a great pillow. If you get a chance, please go by and take a look at MyPillow.
Yes.
The website's mypillow.com, right?
MyPillow.com. Go to mypillow.com, enter the promo code Midnight Ride, or go to mypillow.com/Midnight Ride, and you can get the promo code today.
Outstanding. Now, with that said, let's continue just for a few more minutes with this whole gender pay discrepancy argument. Remember, liberals like to put a name here and a job description here. And no, my bad. They ignore the job description. It's bad man here makes this, good woman here makes this. Sexism.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's start looking at the data behind that, because remember, it's more than meets the eye. You have to ask yourself exactly what's going on here. And the first interesting point I found is that, men choose jobs that are a lot more dangerous. Did you know that?
I did.
And those jobs pay more because they are more dangerous. It's not simply accidental that our lifespans are considerably less than women's lifespans on average, right?
No, it's not.
All right, so consider this. Just in this area, I want you to think about this. My wife's a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a teacher. Okay. I respect teachers. It's a wonderful profession filled with wonderful people. But because of the nature of how they're paid, they're going to make less than an oil field worker.
Yes.
Now, the oil field worker's out there probably making 3 times what a teacher's making, but he's probably going to lose an arm at some point. He may be killed on the job at some point. He has to stay away from home 2 and 3 weeks away all the time. And so discrepancy in pay is better explained by the difference in job performance and requirements, right?
Yes.
And it turns out, if you think about the most dangerous jobs in the world, guess who happens to kind of gravitate toward those jobs?
Men.
Welders, truck drivers, oil field workers, men. And they do that because, men have a more dangerous edge, I suppose. They're maximized by profit. They put themselves in dangerous situations, and the discrepancy is created. That's not sexism. It's not sexism.
Yeah.
It's a matter of choice. And we see this over and over and over. Men will also choose higher paying jobs in their positions. I'll give you an example. Whether it's a law school graduate or a med school graduate, men will sometimes want to be a more advanced lawyer, a specialized lawyer, or a surgeon, whereas women sometimes will choose a little bit less. For whatever reason, it's a matter of choice. It's a matter of preference, but not sexism. And so we have all this data backing up these claims, and I'm trying to figure out, despite all of this data, why the American left just wants to talk about the numbers on a flowchart. It's much more complex than that. Something else I found interesting. In positions where men own a company and women own a company, and they're self-employed, right?
Yeah.
Women still make less.
Okay.
Well, let it know.
Yeah.
You let it go over your head. Think through it. I'm a solo practitioner as a man, solo practitioner as a woman doing the exact same thing, and she still makes less. That's not sexism. It shows she's choosing different tasks because she values different outcomes. Childcare. She wants to be home more. These are good things. These are good things. She needs to be home more. If she wants to be. If she wants to work her tail off, fine. If she wants to go home, fine. But think about it. Women are nurturers, oftentimes. That's going to get me in trouble saying that, isn't it?
It shouldn't.
Biological certainty. And so she chooses to spend more time with her family. She chooses to take more time with her children. And the data shows that on the average, men work more hours per week. They also work more weekends per week because men have different prioritizations. They're looking for profit. She's looking for time with family. That's not sexism. It's human nature. It's common sense. And so remember, when we're talking about perception versus truth, which is the theme of today's show, right? This is the perception. There must be discrimination. The truth is so much more complex. But it took time to explain that.
Yeah.
And our short attention spans and our indifference to all facts known to man will get us thinking knee-jerk wise that women must be discriminated against, and that is not the case. It simply isn't happening.
Well, even to your point, when you were talking about a man and a woman, both as, solo practitioners, my thought was, well, maybe that should. And then when you break down the difference why, then it makes more sense. But most people are not going to take the time to break down the difference why, Chris. Most people are just going to be reactionary. And the media knows this. That's why they exploit it. That's why, again, they didn't care about what Caitlin Clark's getting paid. They don't care about what little old lady working at some corporation makes. They're just trying to exploit to create the victim class.
That's right. Division. Mm-hmm. By the way, an unmarried woman without children makes more than the same job as an unmarried man. Makes more. These are the facts. They're irrefutable. There is no sexism here. It's a matter of questions and stories, differences of opinion, and differences of how one likes to pursue their time. But we have to fight perception, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, this really upset me, and it's probably not going to upset you as much, but I like computers.
Yes.
Always, when I was a kid, I would always mess around with them. This is when it was really basic. Yeah. By the way, speaking about when I was a kid, before I get to this, I was about to come over here earlier, and I literally was shocked to my core by a story. This year is the 40th anniversary of Footloose.
Oh, wow. I saw that.
I'm basically a walking dead man at this stage.
You are. And so am I.
Now, I was little, but I remember Kevin Bacon being pretty cool.
I was littler than.
But there was a dance-off, remember? There was a dance-off. The Guardians of the Galaxy, they always talk about the dance-off and Kevin Bacon being this hero, and I believed that for a while.
Yeah.
Now, Kevin Bacon went to a high school in Utah, and they had this, there was a very strict, socially structured area, and the kids just wanted to dance, man.
Yeah.
And he orchestrated some sort of early rebellion. You know how teenagers are. We thought, that's cool. I wasn't a teenager then, but I was like, yeah, brother, this guy's dancing. I didn't dance, but I thought it was cool. He wanted to. Yeah. Turns out now he's just some old guy coming back to school. He's got probably grandkids there for all we know. And I don't know why that bothered me, but that was 40 years ago.
Because, again, you can still see that movie today. And because it's a moment captured in time, they still look the same as they did when you first saw it. And then you see the reality, going back to your talking about perception versus reality. You see the reality of what Kevin Bacon looks like now, and he's an older man now.
Yeah, I'm not over it. It left a mark.
It still ties into the perception versus reality.
Well, it does. It does. I just, I don't know why that's newsworthy. Outside of me just being really old.
Well, you just needed a vent, and sometimes that's okay.
I mean, next they'll tell me that Star Trek was 50 years old.
It's probably a little older.
That's my worst. I won't talk about it. But at least we still have Bowie. Nobody's going to get that.
Nobody's going to get that one.
Nobody's going to get that, but at least we still have Bowie. All right, so this is what got me fired up the other day, and this is something that only I can find myself, I think, in the middle of, because I'm still a nerd at heart.
Yeah.
And so we've seen this emergence of artificial intelligence. Mm-hmm. And it really is fascinating the way these computers and these algorithms work now to learn. And there's a process by which they learn, and the process is based on a number of very complicated programming methods, and then allowing the allowing the software itself to basically branch out and use the available knowledge we have in the world to learn itself. And now this AI is roughly, they say, the age of about a 10 or 11-year-old.
Okay. And
it's aging very quickly because it's becoming smarter every day. And it seems to be only constrained at this stage by the speed at which you can accumulate information or assimilate information. And we know the speed is getting faster every day because the processing speeds are increasing. The ability of it to reach across different computers, that speed is increasing. And so we have this data set in this artificial intelligence programming that really is impressive. Now, I'll warn you right away, don't do your research papers with this stuff.
No, do not.
You're gonna create vast, terrible, tragic mistakes. Furthermore, those of you using it to write out there right now, I see you. I see it. There's certain patterns AI uses when he writes.
But you're gonna get caught.
Well, I was curious. You're gonna get caught. I was curious the other day, and I I wanted to test whether or not AI could be biased. Because I read one time about it 6 months ago that maybe it was biased against minorities or biased against women. So I was curious, is there a bias? Because remember, the machine has to learn, I keep saying machine, the software has to learn based on the combined knowledge it can access and acquire. So the question is, when it's acquiring and accessing this knowledge, is there a liberal lean? Because the press has been liberal leaning now for about 60 years. Yeah. So if it's looking out there for data, there's going to be a slight lean maybe to the left. That was my concern. And so I tested it.
But it being machine, clearly it's going to be smarter than that, right?
No, that's just it. It still doesn't know in many ways how to discern truth from fiction. And maybe perception is controlling its ability to reason, right? Because it's perceiving something very, very different. So I was curious about the WNBA.
Okay.
Right?
Going back.
And I knew the answers to the questions, but I wanted to see how AI would answer it, because I know how liberal commentators would answer it, and I think I know how conservative commentators would answer it. So I was trying to figure out if AI had
a bias.
Yeah. So I just asked it really simply, has the WNBA ever turned a profit?
That's a simple yes or no answer.
It's a simple yes or no answer. And if we're looking for justice, if we're looking for truth as opposed to perception, just truth, which is what we're told AI brings to the table, truth, the answer is no. That's not what it told me. It gave me this long, rambling diatribe. And let me explain the diatribe.
I've got to hear this.
Let me explain it. It's really interesting because I ask a simple question. Has it ever turned a profit? Now, the answer is no, it has never turned a profit. So NO period is the answer. That's not what it said. It began to make excuses as to why it has not turned a profit. And then it used wiggle words. Has not consecutively turned a profit, or has not consistently turned a profit. No, that's wrong. That's wrong. You have all the access to all the data in the world. And as a lawyer, I look for these wiggle words, and they're using wiggle words. Well, you're right. The WNBA has not consistently turned a profit. Whoa, that implies that it once did.
That's
just not consistently. And so I said, no, that's incorrect. I said, it's never, ever turned a profit. And then it stammered and said, oh, you're right. Sorry for the confusion. I appreciate your quest for the truth. I thought that's why we were here. You should have given me that truth at the very beginning. And the answer is no. But no, there was a bend. When it finally said no, it still tried to explain why. And it still tried to give me reasoning as to why the WNBA is getting better and better, and it's just a matter of time before it turns a profit. I didn't ask that question.
No, you didn't.
Even this machine or this software has learned how to find positions that satisfy the American left. So then I really tested it. I got really offensive.
All right, I got to hear this.
Well, let's talk about it. What percentage of NBA players are white? That's the question I ask it.
Okay.
Now, you might say, why would you ask such a silly question? Because I don't believe in races. I don't like collectives. But I thought it was an interesting question because, remember, liberals would put a number here, and they would say, this is a hard and fast stat. This is a stat. There must be racism. The answer was 16.1%. So 16.1% play in the league. Hey, man, the larger number of percentage in our country are white. So I ask it, I mean, is that evidence of racism? You see the point?
And what did it say?
Oh, my gosh. You went over the top to explain why it's not. Now, remember, liberals use hard numbers like that, short attention spans, to make arguments. I don't believe it's evidence of racism.
No, I don't either.
There's 1,001 factors for that. But when I asked this computer this, it ought to at least be honest with me about it. And here's what it said. And I'm paraphrasing. I would read it, but the print is too small. And the light in here is too dark.
Yeah.
It basically said, look, many reasons for that outside of race. Consider the fact that there's just an interest difference in the sport, particularly because basketball is an inner city sport, and that's a big part of the inner city. And so people gravitate toward it from the inner city, which makes it more African American. Okay. That sounds reasonable enough to me.
Yeah.
That's a fair enough answer. There are interests there, right? And people have interest, and they come from the inner cities. They want to play basketball. Makes perfect sense to me, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So then I tried to drill deeper. I tried to understand even more, and then I went a bit far.
Like I know you.
I'm not done. Go ahead. Go ahead.
I can just see you getting frustrated with the AI when it gives you that spin.
Well, here's the spin. The spin says there's a lot of reasons for that. Nothing to worry about, nothing to see here.
Yeah.
So then I said, okay, what percentage of CEOs in this country are African American?
Okay.
1%, which I knew it was a low number. But the spin was dramatically different. No conversation about pursuits or interest or how it is that kids who grew up in the Hamptons may have a better interest to be a CEO than to be a basketball player. That all was gone now. Now it was purely systemic racism.
So now it goes to the race card.
Yeah, it went to it.
Wow.
And look, the questions are a bit imbalanced. I'll grant you that. But the logic behind how the machine answered is also a bit imbalanced. And it makes me think there's an inherent bias there. It may not remain. It may not always be there. But just consider that if we can't find truth here, you certainly can't find it with individuals or people. But our biases, our prejudices are starting to influence the software's biases.
You said AI is about 10 years old, right?
They say it could be a little older now. It's aging quickly.
But we'll go with 10.
Yeah.
We'll go with 10. We'll say that's the number. It's basically a child. It's a hyper-intelligent child, but it's a child. So, of course, it's going to form a bias. Of course, if every news article that it's pulling, every story that it pulls, or the vast majority of them have that lean, how could it not form that same bias? Because that's the overwhelming data that it's pulling from.
Well, it's an unusual situation because it seems that society as a whole is influencing the AI more than the AI is influencing society as a whole. And that may be because it's only a relatively young. And when I say 10 now, that's a complex number. Scientists ascribe psychological and physical characteristics to this thing. The science is actually older than 10.
Yeah, I know.
But the question is how to discern all this information and knowledge, and it's still struggling to find its footing. The real question is when it becomes self-aware.
That's frightening.
That's when, and look, we've all seen the movies, and we all know.
That's when Skynet happens.
I've talked to some computer programmers over the years, particularly some very wealthy ones that helped create Siri and others, and they believe it's just a matter of time. In fact, one of them said to me, "How do you know it's not already?" I was blown away because I'm thinking I don't, and do you know something I don't?
You brought up
the question.
You brought up 80s movies, and there was one you and I actually caught the tail end of the other day that deals with AI and it trying to comprehend, and that was the Matthew Broderick movie War Games. And you remember,
do you want to play a game?
You want to play a game, and they had to make it comprehend a no-win scenario in order to keep it from destroying the world.
Because that's how we feel battling the establishment.
That's 100% right. Yet
that's how it feels.
Maybe we need somebody to teach us that lesson too, because we still keep trying to battle it.
It's one mouse after the other.
It is.
But I just the point of all that is you set a data point and you try to understand the truth of it.
Yeah.
And even the computer gives us perception.
Yes.
Perception. And maybe that French writer was right. Maybe there is no truth. Maybe it's all perception. And if that's the case, we're in bad shape. Because right now, all the perception molding entities are not on our side.
No.
Goodness gracious, if one more radical protester shows up at Columbia University, I don't know what we're going to do, but you want to find lunacy? You want to find insanity on college campuses? Look no further than the anti-Israeli stance these people are taking on these college campuses.
Look at the Ivy League.
And that's the point. This is supposed to be our best and brightest. Clearly they are not. Clearly things have changed dramatically over the years.
Yep.
But what you've got here are a bunch of children that feel like they're being mistreated. And so they're raising all this hell over there. And so Columbia, rightfully so, calls in the police. Wouldn't you too?
Yes.
I mean, any number of things could happen with these lunatics, right? And now today the professors and the faculty come out and they're blasting the Columbia University president and the police department for daring to show up. They're saying, hey, no, I'm not kidding. Hands off our students. We need to clean house in some of these institutions.
Absolutely, because who do you think's encouraging those kids to do this lunacy?
But remember, molding of these minds, going back to that original point, whether it's universities or whether it's the music or whether it's just the internet or now AI, we are behind the eight ball, so to speak.
Big time.
Yeah, because if our kids are watching this stuff, naturally they're going to be gravitating toward the left. And that's why we need parents to talk to these kids.
Absolutely, we do.
My children thus far, now look, the instant I brag on one, You know how this works as a parent.
Sadly,
The instant I make it sound like one's on the right track, he's going to rob a bank.
you
know
went
this
extreme.
works. No, I'm just saying. It's just a matter of time. And my oldest, I feel pretty comfortable with him for the most part.
I agree.
But again, you just never know. He's 17 years old. Every day's an adventure. You know, the youngest, yeah, he's a Bond villain already. He's 12.
He kind of is a Bond villain.
And it's funny because, you know, I love him more than anything in the world. And I never thought, hey, they would be so expensive. Listen, if you're thinking about having kids, best thing
I
in
am
the world,
not.
Not you, dude. I'm talking about put some money aside right now. I for some reason, I was under the impression that food wasn't that expensive. And now that Biden's in charge, it's like I need gold to pay for it.
I'm struggling to feed myself. I cannot imagine what you're going through to feed little ones.
So I've got these two boys that eat more than anything in the world. I can't control it. And I'm looking for some degree of peace and prosperity, but they're sucking me dry. I mean, it's all but done. But the point I was making is that you raise them the same way, and they turn out vastly different.
Yeah.
And you don't love one more than the other. They're both perfect.
Yes.
But they're perfect in the way God made them. The point is, though, the second I brag on them, something weird's going to happen.
That's fair.
But I have to brag just a bit because right now they seem to value liberty.
They do.
And they seem to value independence, and they seem to value a degree of intelligence that makes them question authority. And if conservatism does anything, it should be questioning authority. That's one of the core components of what we believe. And I'm just happy to see them do that, which is why you see us questioning all of these authorities. Yep. I don't believe they're authorities at all. They're just trying to form opinions, using opinions. And it's getting more difficult to find truth, which is hopefully something we can do from time to time on this show.
We try.
All right. I said earlier, remember cursive writing as kids?
I do.
Can you still write cursively or in cursive?
I don't know how legible it is.
Well, you're part of the story. You're actually.
I probably am.
Yeah,
probably am.
It turns out that there was a movement, believe it or not, by the federal government. All the grand ideas started in Washington, and by the time they filtered down, we're all dumber because of it, right?
Yes.
The movement was a few years ago that our kids did not need to really practice cursive writing, even though that's a motor skill. And that motor skill somehow stimulates the brain and makes us all better. The feds seem to think that, we've moved past that. I guess they can just print things out or maybe type them out, which is, right? Well, it turns out now there's an IQ study going on that has been going on for some time, and it shows that for the first time in a long, long time, IQs are dropping. And now all the states are trying to re-implement cursive writing.
Imagine that.
I mean, another failed Washington idea, which is leading to a bigger point here. Washington has these one-size-fits-all approaches. Now, they have no business being anywhere near education.
I agree.
I have looked at the Constitution, and the word education is simply not in the document. They have no business doing anything as it relates to education. But they do, and they bring out this one-size-fits-all approach, and invariably it fails. Now, the states have to begin to experiment again, which may be a lesson for us for every issue. Quit following their lead. We've had enough pinheads from Columbia and Harvard tell us how to live our lives. Quit following their leads. By the way, did you know Fetterman went to Harvard?
I did not.
Does anybody know Fetterman went to Harvard?
Well, based on what I see now out of the Ivy Leagues, I'm less shocked than I would have been, say, a year or two ago.
I must have missed my application process. How did he get into Harvard? Were they looking for like hoodie diversity?
His hoodie game is on point.
The point of the story is that for whatever reason, now IQs appear to be dropping, and we have this vast amount of information out there for the first time in human history that we can access almost immediately, and yet we appear to become dumber than we were before. I think we should start considering maybe what technology is doing.
I agree.
We talked about Huxley once before in this program and about how we can get addicted to technology, but also begin to pursue it so quickly that we lose its original purpose,
yes.
Right? We're distracted by it all. And listen, I'm not judging because I think some of those TikToks and some of those reels on Facebook are the funniest things I've ever seen, right? But while I'm sitting there at 2 a.m. scrolling through it, I may be doing something productive.
You're not necessarily enhancing your mind.
No, I am not. I'm losing my eyesight. That's the best I can. That's the best I can do for you. But here's the thing, too. Universities used to be needed, obviously, and universities were a point of contact for knowledge. You had libraries, and you had professors, and they taught a mostly unpopular education going back several hundred years, not just in this country, but in Europe as well.
Yeah.
And you had these centers of technology and centers of discovery and centers of knowledge. Now we've got it right here in front of us, and we're not accessing it. We're not using it. And something's happening. The human experiment is always going to be tricky, and there's always going to be things that concern us. But my goodness, what more can we do to harm ourselves? We're all overweight. We all eat too much. We all eat the worst kind of things. Now we're growing dumber because of it. Is technology driving that, or are we driving the technology? Are we just naturally like this? Is this who we are?
I don't know, Chris. Again, it's an interesting discussion because I see it, I sense it, and I can point to things like when Twitter came on the scene, because of the limitation in characters, people had to abbreviate words that were already short. Like instead of spelling out R, you just used the letter R. Now you just see that in everyday typed up things because that's become a habit. And dare I say, some of those people probably don't even know how to spell the word R anymore.
Bear in mind, the English language has been evolving and changing ever since it was written. All languages evolve and change. And maybe this is I hate to say it, maybe this is the next unusual evolution of the English language. I don't know if it comes to that. I'm sure Tolkien would be upset at that.
Oh, he absolutely would be. Did you ever see the movie? It was a few years ago, Idiocracy. Did you ever see that movie?
Only bits and pieces and what you've told me. And you say we're living through that.
We are living in that now. I have a T-shirt that I made myself. I say it on my own podcast, The Right Side. We are living in the dumbest timeline. And you are seeing that right now. Speaking
of the dumbest timeline, let's wrap up real quick with this one stat piece I wanted to share. And listen, this is not perception.
Hold on.
This is no, we're not. We don't have time.
Gotcha.
This is not perception. This is truth again. No, you heard me complaining earlier about Ukraine. I don't like that vote.
Mm-hmm.
But they sent right at $90 billion to Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
I had to vote no on that. Just want to be clear on that. And yet you saw how small that number was in relative comparison to the rest of the budget that we also should be diminishing and decreasing.
Yes.
We could build a border wall, complete it fully for roughly $20 billion. A fraction of a fraction of a fraction of what we just sent to Ukraine.
Yep.
Now, to build a border wall, it's all upside from that stage because then you don't have so many migrants coming, taking public resources. Yeah. It's a money-saving tactic, is it not?
It is.
I only bring that up because Denver has an advocate there for migrants, a.k.a. illegal aliens.
Mm-hmm.
And he's saying the 6 months of rent and food just not enough. So Denver has proposed that they pay 6 months of these migrants' rent and food with American dollars, American taxpayer dollars. And they're complaining now. It's not enough.
Of course they are.
He also says it's a slap in the face and it's offensive. You know what's offensive? The fact you're getting a dime of American money.
I agree.
That's what's offensive. If this money belongs anywhere, it belongs back in the pockets of the taxpayers, or goodness gracious, if you just have to spend it, at least take care of our own first. America first should mean something. It's not just a slogan. We cannot take care of the rest of the world. We cannot be the world's police force for everybody else. We have to learn to handle our business at home. I used to wonder how we would ever lose a war with anyone because we have an ocean on one side and an ocean on the other. There's just no way to mass an army big enough to give us any real trouble. Our problem's within. Our problem's division within. And when you start talking about money like this, then you're literally giving it to people who have broken the law and they're still not happy. They should be thanking us for not sending them back because a real president would find a way to get these people back home.
Amen.
But we don't have a real president. We got a guy playing games, Joe Biden. He's trying to get reelected. If he has to spend every dime of your money to get reelected, he will. If he has to forgive student loans,
he will.
He will. That's the other issue. That just burns me up. You're telling me that these blue-collar workers who did not go to college, but yet went out and worked their tails off as oil field workers and welders that make this country move, that make it beat, that make it alive, they have to pay back some pinhead's degree that majored in 19th century women's studies? Come on, folks. Come on. That's not the way it's supposed to work. No. We're not in a position of being each other's caregivers. That's not the government's role. It's not my role. Problem is, we're all upside down. Do you know why we're upside down, Jane?
Why?
because we're following perception and not truth.
That's accurate.
Perception. It's all about perception. No one wants to drill for the truth because the truth is uncomfortable. The truth can be painful. But America has to find a way to find the truth again. It's not about being put to bed softly. It's not about nighttime stories and feel-good stories anymore. We're here to save a country, and it's going to take a lot of sacrifice to get there. And if you're not willing to sacrifice, you're on the wrong boat. You're on the wrong team. Don't be a taker. Don't be a taker. It's time for all of us to do the right thing to save this country. Right?
Amen. You said it right there.
This is Chris McDaniel's America. It's been great being here. We look forward to the next episode. Jack, as always, thank you.
Thank
and
you.
I promise you, I know how badly you want to wear that mask.
It's right here.
All right, you want to go out with it?
I think we have to.
Oh.
I mean, I think the audience would be disappointed if we don't.
I'm not sure they care, but I care.
Well, I think the in-studio audience would.
Can you smoke a cigar? Can you smoke a cigar with it? I wonder. Take your time.
I would love to try.
Take your time. Everybody wants to see it. That's. I don't know what to think about it. It looks like yeah, well, does it? Does it? All right. Well, now you have it. That's the high point of this show.
Remember, this was your idea.
It's not. Not now that I've seen it. Now that I'm looking at it, I'm a little embarrassed for you. Okay. We'll see you next time. Thanks for being here.